Yeah, now the part of the show where you need to get involved. As you know, you can contact us at Marathonbet Pod on Twitter, at Marathonbet Pod on Twitter. And last week we asked you, we were talking about which players, because we knew we were going to be doing Sloth this week, are really, really lazy. And you know what? Hundreds of people replied, again, as I said, on Twitter at Marathonbet Pod, but they nearly all focused on 3 players. So I'm going to pick out representatives. So first up, then, thanks to Harrison Reid, who's at Harrison Daffyd on Twitter, who said, you obviously never saw John Joe Shelby at Swansea when we were talking about what players are lazy. A master on his day, but a slug every other.
I didn't get that impression about Shelby. I mean, I think that when you saw him in the past, and he had lots to say for himself when he was at Liverpool, came off against Man United and blasted Ferguson. Look, Shelby's not one of those players that I think is lazy. I think he's under-resourced in the teams that he's played in.
Okay, well, what about Mal Robinson, who again on Twitter has said, I mean, Mal, this is a very controversial view. He says, Matt Le Tissier was the laziest player I ever saw, but he scored some raspers.
No, I don't think. I think Le Tissier is a luxury player, but I think he's a quality player. And if you look at his achievements at Southampton, I don't think he was put in the team to work hard. I think certain players, you just give them the ball. We had one at Palace, Victor Moses. I remember Neil Warnock saying to him, I'm not interested in you tackling back. I want your head up, getting in the opposition's half. I don't want you running back and tracking people back. I just want you to attack people.
And you're a great one for comparing strategies to outcomes. And the outcome for Southampton Football Club was that they stayed in the Premier League year after year because he got 20 goals. Right. And I'm sure his teammates took him to the pub every season, said, have another pie, Matt.
I think it'll probably go down to the fact that Matt Le Tissier spent a lot of his time in McDonald's as people's perception of his pre-match meal that he himself broadcast, that gives that thinking about him. I think he's a luxury player. I don't think he's a lazy player.
The next one, though, I think may apply because there's a laziness about things that he's involved in, and perhaps other than his football skill, and maybe he's undersold his football skill as well. Paul Barrett is among dozens of you who just wrote the same 2 words, Mario Balotelli.
Why always me? That was his strapline, wasn't it?
Because
you're a moron and you let fireballs out your window. Very talented player. I sort of put Daniel Sturridge in that sort of bracket as well. I know that's going to be controversial in certain people's minds. I don't know if Balotelli's lazy. I didn't watch enough of him to see. I don't think he's that sort of player that runs around pressing fullbacks. Inordinate talent that he had. But, lots of clubs have the same issues with him. But I don't know if laziness is at the centre of their thinking. I just think attitude and outlook is his problem.
And there you see what happens to you on the Marathon Bet podcast. Even when we ask your opinion, we may not agree with it. And we'll tell you absolutely right. We'll have more homework for you, of course. And you can always contact us on Twitter. Remember that address again, at Marathonbet Pod. At Marathonbet Pod. Yeah, this is the Marathon Bet podcast, and of course, one of the best things about that, it means that Marathon Bet bless them in their beauty, have allowed us, myself and Simon, to try and win some money for our chosen charities. As I keep saying, we're not the best at this prediction game. I think it's good. What I love about English football is it's largely unpredictable. Norwich, Manchester City being a classic example. So it is hard to win the money. We have to pick the winners of 3 games, and eventually we will get some money for these charities. We're joined now from Marathon Bet by Dan Taus, who will give us the correct odds and the likelihood of this week's selections actually coming good. What games have we picked, Dan?
So, Simon, you went first and you chose Leicester.
I did.
To beat Spurs.
Yeah.
Do you want to give us your reason?
That's just pure
slightly vengeful.
Pure revenge because they gave Palace a clogging last week.
I just think that Leicester at home are quite a formidable outfit. I like Brendan Rodgers. I think if Vardy's fit, he will give Spurs all the trouble that they can handle. And I don't think Spurs are that great on the road at the moment. So
the Spurs haven't been great on the road since January, I think.
They haven't won a league game. I'm not sure they've won any game. Did they win in Ajax in the Champions League? They've certainly not won a Premier League game on the road since January. And if they're going to finish in the top 4 this year, as everyone seems to think, and indeed Marathon Bet seems to think, if I'm looking at your odds, they're going to have to change that because you won't get all those points at home, will you?
No, you're right. And Leicester are 85 to 40. I mean, you look at Leicester at the moment, they're 5th at the moment. They're 2 points off second. I know we discussed in last week's podcast because they finished in the top 4. That you felt is a little bit out there for them. If you look at their next few fixtures, between now and the middle of November, they got Spurs obviously at the weekend, Newcastle, Liverpool, Burnley, Southampton and Palace. There's some very winnable games there. If you pick up something against Spurs and Liverpool, they could be heading near the top of the table if teams like City keep falling away.
They've made a pretty similar start to the year they won the title. Let's leave it at that.
All right, next. So Danny, you
Yeah.
went for Everton at home to Sheffield United.
I just think, two things have happened here. I think Sheffield United, whose manager we all admire, they, as we saw their home defeat last weekend, they are a very, very industrious side, and they do all those weird things with the overlapping centre halves, but they're playing in the Premier League now. It's big boys. And Southampton just sat there and waited for them to make a mistake and got their mistake. And I think they're going up against an Everton side who I thought were shocking this weekend. But you can't be shocking 2 weeks running, otherwise the manager starts to get into the crosshairs of the owners. Everton have got to do what they're going to do at home. I mean, Everton were really, really bad in that 3-1 defeat at Bournemouth. I didn't see what kind of shape they were. I didn't see what kind of team they're going to be. But it's rare that the mid-table teams allow themselves 2 complete weeks off. And I suspect that Sheffield United are... If you ask me, Dan, who's going to get relegated this year, I've got no clue as to where the Premier League set up, but I think Sheffield United will still be my favourites. And this is the sort of game that Everton, if they've got anything about it at all, have to win.
I agree. I mean, Everton, I can never quite work them out, as you said. I mean, you look at the weekend and they were dreadful. They've won 2, lost 2 and drawn 1, but they have won 2 at home, and you think they'd be have too much for Sheffield United. They're 71 to 100, they're odds on as expected,
Yeah.
and I think they would have too much for Sheffield United as well.
What was our third choice we made between us?
Your third choice was yours, Danny.
Yeah.
You went for the Hammers to beat Man United at home.
Look, at the moment, Manchester United, they did the thing that they really wanted to do last weekend when they won at home. They kept a clean sheet. But they got the advantage of an early goal, a penalty that Rashford converted, and I think that settled everything down. I don't think they're very settled just now, and I think West Ham, as I sometimes have to say through slightly gritted teeth, have got the best squad of players that I can remember over there since the days of Trevor Brooking. The manager, he's not at the stage of his career where he wants to be a revolutionary, but he knows about football, he knows how to put a team out, and as well, West Ham United, you see their home performances against big teams are very, very good because their crowd get after them.
If you look at that boy up front for West Ham as well, and if you look at the way if you look at the way that Man United played on the weekend, they're 2 centre halves that's all over the place, Maguire and Lindelof, and I think he'll give them real trouble.
Yeah, and the likes of Yarmolenko will not allow Manchester United's fullbacks to get the kind of freedom of the pitch they had at the weekend. I would be sorry if I was proved wrong here because of the state of the bet. I wouldn't be surprised, but I think that they'll give Manchester United a very good game.
Well, Man United, obviously they won on Saturday against Leicester, but prior to that they hadn't won a Premier League game for the first game of the season, which was against Chelsea. They won 4-0. And obviously at the time of recording, West Ham were playing tonight away to Aston Villa. They win that, they go third above Spurs. So actually you're right about the squad of players and the Pellegrini's put together. I think they're a very good side. And West Ham are 66 to 25 to beat Man United at home on Saturday. So
that looks long to me, but I'm not a bookmaker.
Well, look, let's all hope the bets come in, and if they all do, then we'll just be shy of 400 quid for your chosen charities.
That would be absolutely delicious. Thanks, Dan. Now, this is one of my favourite parts of the show where Simon and I really have to kind of put our money where our mouth is and select individuals who are guilty of this week's sin, in this case, Sloth. They go into our sin bin. We're building up a very good squad of very bad people. We'll pick an ultimate 11 and we get to the end of the series. So, Simon, I'll start with you because I'd rather you got in trouble first.
Okay, mate.
Who is going in the sin bin for you for the sin of Sloth?
I'm conflicted. My first reaction was to look at Granit Xhaka's pathetic, lazy response after the game about the players being frightened by Watford in the second half, or frightened of the fact that they could get caught, and they certainly did. But I can't be accused of patronage. I'm going to pick Mamadou Sakho
Of Palace.
because of Palace. Despite the fact that Spurs were very good, I just think some of his performance and his level of fitness and awareness in that game, to my mind, looked slothful. It looked like he was lazy. The first header that he completely misjudged. Now you could say we've been out for a long time, but I don't care. Surely you come back strong. You
can't be tired.
You shouldn't be tired.
It was also very early in the game. He didn't have that excuse.
So I'm going to put Mamadou Sakho into our sin bin and our sin team.
Okay, well, actually, I'm going to match him up with another centre half. And I know sometimes talking about David Luiz is like shooting fish in a very small barrel. In fact, in a thimble. Yeah. You can get a fish into a thimble. It's like shooting that. But honestly, I think it's the laziness of him is that he will not learn from his mistakes. He is a brilliant footballer. If you gave him a football and say, pass this thing around, he's a good athlete, all the rest of it, but he makes the same mistakes, both psychological and tactical over and over again. That penalty, how many times have you seen him come to the edge of the box, stick a leg half out, then try and pull it back, inviting referees to give perfectly reasonable penalties. You see that thing where he goes to the touchline and decides to pull out the tackle. We saw it again in the North London derby, and we see it a number of times, and he just, I think it's either stubbornness, Simon, which is also a kind of weird
Arrogance.
thing to have. Yep. Or I think it's just plain laziness. He thinks he's a great player. He's got medals to prove it.
Yeah.
He's been at some of the great clubs of world football. And once again this weekend for Arsenal, God bless him. He was the leader of their laziness boot camp on the edge of their own box.
Yes.
And he goes definitely into our sin bin.